Welcome to Module 4, where we're going to dive into discussions about freedom and bondage. We're going to look at the role perspective plays in your life, and we're also going to talk about what your emotions are trying to tell you. Let's get started.
All right. So obviously we've already talked about engagement action. So basically another way of summing up these four quadrants is action plus perspective, or we could say seen plus unseen. So we're going to focus in this module on the unseen. So we're going to be talking about perspective, which it has the currency of focus or attention, whatever you want to call it. That's the form that perspective takes. Just like action has the currency of time and money, that's the form it takes. Perspective's currency is focus or attention. I like to think of perspective as the lens that you put on to see something. And maybe a good way to describe this is, I remember a few years ago, my husband and I were walking on the walking path that we typically walked on. And I looked around and everything looked so beautiful. It was the particular lighting and time of year. And I realized that if I were on vacation taking this walk, it wouldn't be mundane. It would be like, wow, I'll take a picture of that and take a picture of this and post that. And so we decided that we liked the idea of putting on our vacation lenses whenever we could. And so that's an example of perspective, how the lens you put on really filters what you see. And what a lot of people don't realize is that your perspective is what causes you to feel a certain way. And you may be saying like, no, I feel a certain way because fill in the blank of condition. I feel blank because condition. But I love the way Viktor Frankl puts it. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl not only was a neurologist, but he was also a Holocaust survivor. So I think he has a lot of, that quote has a lot of validity to me because of those two things. And I'm going to read it one more time. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now, when I say that perspective equals the way you feel, I certainly don't mean to condone any kind unkind action towards you. I also don't mean to undermine any experience you had that was like super joyful, maybe your wedding or the birth of a child. All I'm trying to do here is look for something that's consistent. And if you look to conditions equaling the way people feel, it's totally inconsistent. Because why is it that two people experiencing the same thing or looking at the same thing can have completely different feelings and completely different responses? And then, to me, that is an indication that that can't be the stimulus. It's a stimulus, but it can't be the stimulus that causes the feeling. So we're looking for root level consistency, not superficial. It seems like this is the case. What actually is consistent all the time? And once again, what is not consistent is a circumstance equaling a feeling. What is consistent is the perspective of a circumstance equaling a feeling. So that may or may not be something new for you to hear. It may or may not resonate. When you put this to the test, though, and you start to discover its consistency, the cool thing that comes out of it is that your feelings start to become guidance. Instead of them being erratic, or you don't know why you feel this way and somebody else doesn't, you're too emotional, blah, 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 fill in the blank. Suddenly, your feelings are indicators and they are guidance. And not only that, they're consistent guidance. And what they're telling you is when you feel shitty, you have your bondage lenses on. When you feel good, you have your freedom glasses on. Simple as that. Shitty, happy. Now, we have different degrees to that. There's certainly different conditions that make it easier to put our freedom lenses on and make it easier to put our bondage lenses on. But if you want the root level, simplest, most consistent description of what's going on, again, bad feelings here, good feelings here. Now, one thing that's interesting, well, actually, I'm going to read this to you. So this is what often goes through our head. Let's talk about work. You might say, when it comes to my job, I absolutely hate my hours. The coworkers I sit adjacent to has a nervous tic, and the coworker behind me is always interrupting me. Plus, he brings hard-boiled eggs for lunch. My boss is power hungry. The office is too cold in the winter and too hot in the summer. Plus, the air conditioner that obviously doesn't work well makes this annoying sound, and don't even get me started on the tech guy that comes once a week. Sounds familiar, right? We all have different versions of that. So it would be easy to say, I feel in bondage because of my job, and I just listed all the conditions that support that, right? So let's work our way up to freedom and see if we can do it with perspective only. So not switching your job, just perspective. And I would start by just saying, instead of listing all those details, just say, I don't look forward to going to work. Do you see how it just kind of like lightens the mood a little bit? You're not like this and this and this and this and this and this and this. It's just, I don't look forward to going to work. You're not ignoring your feeling. You're just working your way up. So what is important to realize about perspective, and this comes from the work of Esther Hicks, is that here, just going to go in the middle, here is general. And as you move up here, this becomes more and more specific. So my coworker brings hard-boiled eggs, and my boss is power hungry, and so on and so forth. But did you feel a little relief when we just said, I don't look forward to going to work? You're not in freedom, but did you feel a little bit of relief? You moved up because we just got more general. There's not so much momentum behind it, okay? And that's all we're doing, little bits of relief. Relief is the word you want to remember when it comes to bondage. You're not going to go from here to here very often. You're not going to go from life sucks, work sucks to it's awesome, unless you're being fake. If you want to be real, you do baby steps of relief. And that often is going from specific to general. Now, the cool thing is once you get, well, there's two things I want to bring up. I often think about perspective as, I say to myself, just try on a perspective. Like you're trying on clothes, just try on a perspective. And when you do that, you start to feel the difference. You start to really recognize that your feelings do equal your perspective, and you can feel if you're moving up or you're moving down. So think of perspective like clothing. You have the power to try it on and see if you like it. Now, once you get up here, the switch into freedom becomes easier. I kind of think of it like my husband and I both have glasses, but we don't have that bad of vision. So our prescription isn't the same, but like I can put on his glasses and still see pretty well. You know what I'm saying? But if we had a very different prescription, or I should say really bad vision with a specific prescription, I couldn't just put on his glasses and see better. Okay? So what I'm saying is once you get to general, you can switch your lens pretty easily. But when you're way in the specifics of your bondage, you're not going to get there. Okay? So one way to switch from bondage to freedom when you're in general is just to brainstorm, to start asking yourself questions like this. Wouldn't it be fun if I did look forward to going to work? So remember, the general statement we said is just, I don't look forward to going to work. So now, wouldn't it be fun if I did? What if it's possible to look forward to going to work? What if I could? So you're just starting to like warm up to the idea that maybe there's some freedom lurking here, instead of telling yourself this story over and over and over. So take a breath on that. There's two things that people often, when I have conversations like this, bring up at this point, and it's kind of goes along the lines of, well, Annalisa, it's great to daydream, but what should I actually do about my job, right? And put a different way, it might say, the question might be, am I really in the inspired quadrant if I'm just like talking to myself and I'm not taking action? And one thing I want to remind you of is that one of the forms of engagement is time. And when you are taking the time to cultivate a perspective, that is engaged. And my husband always says, who's studied sport and performance psychology, you can't outperform your own self-image. So put another way, you can't take action beyond your perspectives. So are actions important? Obviously. But if you have certain perspectives that won't allow you to have the confidence to take an action or even think about an action, you can't perform beyond it. Another one from Viktor Frankl. Everything can be taken from a man, and let's be reminded he was a Holocaust survivor. But one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So, once again, is it more difficult in a concentration camp to have the lens of freedom? Yes, obviously. There are certain situations that make putting on that lens extremely difficult. But once again, the only thing that is consistent in regards to how we feel is perspective. Perspective equals feeling. And secondly, you can use people like Viktor Frankl or Nelson Mandela as guiding lights. These people were literally persecuted and jailed, and yet came from that experience with the mindset of freedom. So maybe we're not practicing that. Maybe they are North Stars, guiding lights, but they're showing us what's possible with our perspectives. Does that make sense? So again, this isn't condoning any condition someone's putting you in or other people in. Instead, it's helping you reclaim the freedom so you can get out of that condition more quickly. So how do our chronic lenses develop? This comes back to our conversation about sledding hills. Just like we talked about, physical habits become ingrained because of the way we wire our brain. That's the same with thought patterns. So what we are told by people around us, by our culture, what we are telling ourselves over and over again, how we interpreted a situation. So maybe in second grade, you got sent to the principal's office, and you told yourself you're bad from that experience, and then you kept telling yourself, I must be bad, I must be bad. Someone else got sent to the principal's office and said, must prove I create my own rules. I create my own rules, I create my own rules, I create my own rules. This is how it happens. We cannot outperform our self-talk, period. No one does. Our self-talk is what creates literal physical pathways in our brain. The conversation you're having with yourself. And along the same lines, the questions you ask yourself are extremely important. And I love this quote, what shapes our lives are the questions we ask refuse to ask, or never even think to ask. So take a second. That might be a new thought for you. Take a second and just jot down what you think might be examples of a question. I'll call it a good question, simply meaning you have your freedom lenses on, and then a question that would keep you here. What would be a question that would shape your brain to have bondage pathways? What's a question that shapes your brain to have freedom pathways? So we're just brainstorming here. Is anybody willing to share what might be some examples of questions that are going to keep you stuck here? Some that come to mind for me are, why me? Also, what if, in a bad sense? What if this happens? What if this happens? If I do this, what if this happens? Any other ones coming to you guys? What about the freedom side of it? Yeah.
How can exercise be more fun?
Love it.
What can you do to feel more free with meals?
Do you see how your mind just goes in different places? So to drive this point home, I want to introduce you to what's called the dreaded drama triangle. And this comes from an author. His name is David Emerald. And I'm going to work you through it up here. I'm just working through it. Have you guys ever heard of Philosopher's Notes? Yeah, they're really cool. So this guy just put together, I think at this point he has like 400 or 500 self-help books, and he read them all, and then he summarizes them into a 6-page PDF. So I love the summary he did of it, so I'm just going to work through that to kind of give you the summary of it. So the dreaded drama triangle. I'll read just the summary of the book. This comes from David Emerald. He says, your life is kind of a laboratory where you're constantly experimenting with your own higher knowing, always increasing your capacity to design the life you choose. Human beings must create. It's hardwired. The question is, are you consciously creating, or are you sleepwalking through your human life? So, the dreaded drama triangle consists of 3 personalities. Here we have victim. Here we have persecutor. And over here we have rescuer. So I'll use quotes from the book to explain this a little more. When you inhibit any of these 3 roles, you're reacting to fear of victimhood, loss of control, or loss of purpose. You're always looking outside yourself to the people and circumstances of life for a sense of safety, security, and sanity. So he describes the victim. Every victim requires a persecutor, but the persecutor isn't always necessarily a person. The persecutor could be a condition or a circumstance. A persecuting condition might be a disease or a heart attack or an injury. A persecuting circumstance could be a natural disaster like a hurricane, earthquake, or your house burning down. He goes on to explain, all victims have experienced a loss, a thwarted desire or aspiration, even if they're not aware of it. Frozen in fear, as a victim, you avoid responsibility because you think your experience is beyond your control. This stance keeps you from making decisions, solving problems, or going after what you want. Victims may be defensive, submissive, over-accommodating to others, passive-aggressive in conflict, dependent on others for self-worth, overly sensitive, even manipulative. They're often angry, resentful, and envious, feeling unworthy or ashamed about their circumstances. More about the persecutor. These people are often authoritarian and rigid in their views, exerting power over others in an effort to keep others from having power over them. Persecutors may act grandiose and self-righteous to mask their own insecurities. Persecutors, like victims, act out of fear. They may seem fearless, but actually persecutors are almost always former victims. And then finally, the rescuer. A rescuer isn't always a person. Addictions to alcohol, drugs, sexual addictions, workaholism are all ways we numb out. We can numb out. Can rescue the victim from his or her own feelings. Okay. So the persecutor is rescuing the victim from his or her own feelings. Excuse me, the rescuer is. Did I say persecutor? Sorry, the rescuer is. Persecutors feel loss of control. Rescuers feel loss of purpose. And rescuers need victims, someone to protect or fix in order to bolster their self-esteem. So if we go back to my example, the way I used to relate to my body and food and exercise, I felt like I was a victim to food in my body. I felt like I was out of my body was trying to gain weight. Food I had to eat. Food was going to make me gain weight, right? So my rescuer was exercise. So here's another vicious 180, put a different way. I was the victim, exercise was the rescuer. Once again, I was doing it on a regular basis, but is this a healthy dynamic? Absolutely not. Okay? Now the good news is there's an antidote to the dreaded drama triangle, and he calls it the empowerment triangle. Excuse me, the empowerment dynamic. So with the empowerment dynamic, persecutor becomes a challenger. Rescuer becomes a coach. And the victim becomes a creator. So I'll explain these a bit more. One of the fundamental differences between the victim orientation and the creator is where you put your focus or attention. Remind yourself what the currency is of perspective. Focus and attention. So I'm going to say that one more time. One of the fundamental differences between the victim and the creator is where you put your focus or attention. For victims, the focus is always on what they don't want, the problems that seem constantly to multiply in their lives. They don't want the person, condition, or circumstance they consider their persecutor. And they don't want the fear that leads to fight, flee, or freeze reactions either. Creators, on the other hand, place their focus on what they do want. Doing this, creators still face and solve problems in the course of creating outcomes, but their focus remains fixed on their ultimate vision. The focus in the creator orientation is on vision. You orient your thoughts and actions toward creating what you most deeply desire versus avoiding what you don't want. The challenger. All of life's experiences are teachers in some sense, challenging us to grow and evolve. Although the persecutor certainly provokes a reaction, the challenger elicits a response by encouraging the creator to acquire new knowledge, skill, or insight. Both roles provoke change, but in different ways. And then finally, the antidote to rescuer is coach. Mainly, a coach supports, assists, and facilitates the creator in manifesting his or her own desired outcome. A coach holds others to be whole, resourceful, and creative. They help you dig deep inside your own self to gain clarity about what you want to create in your life. And now we're going to get back to the power of questions here. He uses simple questions to shift from one to the other. So the way you talk about yourself and your life, what he calls your story, has a great deal to do with what shows up in your day-to-day experience. Your thoughts create filters through which you view your life. And if you think of yourself as a victim, you filter all that happens to you through the lens of the DDT, meaning the dreaded drama triangle. And you find plenty of evidence to support that viewpoint. That's why the orientation you adopt is so important. It exerts a powerful influence on your life direction. Living from the creator orientation is actually more challenging. In the victim orientation, I didn't have to exercise conscious choice. I just reacted to my circumstances. And I feel like that goes back to our conversation about discomfort and then comfort versus the comfort of knowing everybody else is in your same situation, but then living with chronic discomfort. Basically, that's what I hear him saying is there's initial moments of discomfort when you're the creator because you're doing things differently than most people. You're doing things differently than you used to do. And what that's really, what that's an indication of is that you're taking full responsibility, like he said. So when you're here, a situation is coming at you and you just react the same way you always did, right? When you're here, you decide there's a space between the stimulus and the response. And I choose within that space. So here are the questions. Actually, I'm not going to write them out. I'll just point out here. So to go from victim to creator, he simply says the question is, what do I want? So instead of what don't I want, it's just simply, what do I want? So when you feel like you're in bondage, because I'm not sure if you realize this yet, but all this is the freedom side, and this is the bondage side. So when you feel shitty, you're in bondage, you can ask yourself questions to get out. When you feel like a victim of something, you can ask, what is it that I do want? So you might not want what's in your bank account. You might not want your current schedule or that you have to do this or someone treated you this way. But simply asking yourself, what is it that I do want, can flip you here. It starts to have your brain look for those answers instead of training your brain to look for what is it that's so awful about my life. Persecutor to challenger, the simple question is, what is my intention? Is my intention to help myself or someone grow? Is my intention kindness? Or is my intention making someone wrong? Being above them? Is my intention to control and manipulate? And then finally, the question that can help you switch from rescuer to coach is, do I believe this person I'm serving is whole without me? So the rescuer believes I'm fixing someone, and they get their false sense of purpose from that because they have lost their own innate sense of purpose, so they're trying to fix something outside themselves to find that purpose. Where the coach knows they're whole, they could figure it out without me, I might just be helpful in this situation. So just like our 4 quadrants, how we're all doing different dances, and it's just really about how often can I practice this, meaning free and engaged. It's going to be the same here. You're going to find yourself in victim mode multiple times per day. I do, multiple times. You're going to find yourself in these roles, and it's just how often do you practice switching? So you're not a creator and then a creator forevermore. The question is, in this moment, am I practicing the perspective of a creator? You're not a rescuer and then a rescuer forevermore. In this moment, am I practicing what a rescuer would think and ask? Or am I practicing what a coach? And the funny thing is, sometimes they might do the same things, but the intention behind it makes a big difference. Especially, and most importantly, in regards to how you personally feel about it. It doesn't feel good to think somebody needs you to be okay. It feels a lot better to know people are whole, they figure it out, but we all can be helpful to each other. Bondage. Take a deep breath. And write down, again, top 1 to 3 insights.
I think your double triangle is kind of the most aha for me of the why you can't tell us the answers so far. You are the coach.
I like it. Yes. I don't want to rescue you.
No.
Yeah. I like it. You don't need to be rescued, that's why.
I thought an insight that kind of stuck with me was right at the beginning when you said that taking the time to cultivate a perspective is engagement. And because I feel like, sometimes when you're in that like bondage place of like feeling really shitty, you're like, oh, I need to like do something differently. And that small act of just changing the way that you're thinking, to me, doesn't feel like an action, right? Like, you think like, oh, that's just what I'm supposed to do, But like when you treat that as like, this is my baby step right now. This is what I need to be doing. And even if at first, the first time I say it, like, oh, I'm a good cook, and it's like, you're kind of just making that up, but the more that you say it, or the more that you change it into that question of like, what if I could totally like look forward to meal planning, like, and it's not something, and so like just starting with that is doing something, because I always want to have the end result right away, right? I want to go from being really crappy to like amazing. I want that thing. So I think that was like a good thing to remember, and that we can't outperform our own self-talk. So like you're not going to do better than what you think you are. So you got to think it first, and then it will, do that. So
Well said.
yeah,
Well said.
Echo exactly what you said.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, everything you said is exactly what I was thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
And not being able to outperform your own self-talk.
Yeah.
The filter that you have on every day.
Mm-hmm. Every moment.
Every
Yeah.
moment, yeah.
And on that note, I'm just feeling, I think when I used to hear like, it's a moment-to-moment thing, that kind of really overwhelmed me. I'm like, I don't want to be aware every time. You know what I mean? And I think what I've come to realize is, a few things. I think it's not necessarily that you have to be aware of your thoughts. It's you have to be aware of your feelings, because your feelings are the perspective. So it's not like every moment you have to, but you'll notice I'm feeling really good right now, or I'm feeling really bad. And in those moments, when you take the time to shift things, that's when it's really powerful. And then what I found is the more I practice it, the more I'm sensitive on more subtle stages when I'm feeling bad. So it's kind of like the sledgehammer tickle feather thing. I don't always have to go down way far to be like, something has to change here with the way I'm thinking. I can just go down a little bit and be like, oh, this feels off. Usually I feel this way. Does that make sense? So it's not like monitoring yourself all the time. It's just noticing when you feel bad, and then realizing that you're going to start to notice more and more because you become more sensitive to feeling good, which is a good thing. Does that make sense? But the moment-to-moment thing feels good to me now because it's like you have more control. It's like you're molding your day instead of being like, is my day going to be okay? You know what I mean? And then your day how's my year going to turn out? Where now it's just like you just mold the moment. That molds your day, which molds your week, so on and so forth. Thank you. Such a bad student.
No.
Any other thoughts?
When you were talking about when you're in bondage and the details of it are very specific, that it's harder to break away from it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seemed like kind of a simple thing to do to make it more general and then kind of neutralize the bondage. And then flipping it like you did earlier on her comment.
She totally
but to think that the more detailed our attention gets to the things on the freedom side of it, the harder that is to break.
Ooh, you just
Yeah,
gave me
right?
goosebumps. Yeah.
But I need some coaching to get there.
Well said, though. I love that.
One of the things I've been working on to try to break bondage is I read about this concept of a let it go box, where because I get upset really easily, and it was causing me to have like symptoms of like high blood pressure and heart attack and stuff, and I had to learn that there are things I cannot control, and so I can't like get really mad about it every time because it's just bad for me. So I'm working on like if there's something that I cannot change, then you like write it on a little piece of paper and stick it in this let it go box, and it metaphorically helps you like realize
Let it
what
go.
you can change. Let it go. So I've used it a couple of times.
I
and
love
it's-
that.
Yeah, it's all about that moment because I've learned to say like, okay, I'm really upset this thing is happening, but supposedly it's my thoughts that make it worse. So how can I change my thought? And historically what I would do is, since I don't know how to change the thought, I would just like go for a walk or something and not think about that thing because I didn't know what else to do.
But that, you bring up two good points. To that point, it's like, again, how we've talked about how engagement and perspective play off each other, you know? Like sometimes you're in really specific bondage and just sitting down and engaging with your thoughts might not be the best thing to do. And so taking a walk can help you just take a breath so you could actually do something about your perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. I also love that you said it's something with the let it go box, something along the lines of, if I can't do anything about it, it's just hurting me. And it made me think about how I love the idea that things like forgiveness are for you. They're not for the other person. And I think it brings up a good point about perspective when I'm asking you to consider these things about perspective, and regardless of the situation, asking you to do whatever you, or see if you could raise it. Again, that's in no way condoning what anyone is doing to you. And that's in no way thinking that you should be a doormat. I found it to be the exact opposite. The more I practice thoughts of freedom, the more assertive, calm, confident I become. So it you know, things like forgiveness or letting go or raising your perspective about it doesn't mean you become someone who just lets people walk all over you. They're two different things. Any other thoughts? All right, let's keep rolling.
With lesson 1 complete, I hope you're beginning to feel the power in the perspectives you choose. In lesson 2, we're going to shine a light on bondage's seduction. See you over there. Module 4, lesson 2.